Yeah. We think the same thing, too. He repealed our prevailing wage law, which essentially was the minimum wage you pay to construction workers on a public work project. Mayor Pete acted fast. He knew that not only was that a basic wage protection, but that was a protection against payroll fraud. It was a protection about enforcing all labor laws. So he worked with his council members of the South Bend City Council, and they passed a responsible bidder ordinance to ensure that contractors weren't going to try and cheat on wages and avoid workers' comp and unemployment insurance so that they could make more profits. He was one of the first people in the state to do that. I think you'll find, if you haven't already, Pete's a listener, a strategic planner, a man of action. He's wicked smart, he's caring, and when needed, he's Navy strong. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring to you the mayor, the Navy lieutenant, the Afghan veteran, the Harvard grad, the Rhodes Scholar. Ladies and gentlemen, with your help, I give you the next President of the United States, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Thank you, Ankeny. Thank you so much. It is hard not to think of that night about 6 months ago. Right here in Ankeny, it was approximately 100 degrees colder then than it is now. Our campaign operation had approximately 5 people. And that was a really good night, too. That was one of the nights I realized we might be onto something here. So thanks for the warm reception on that cold night, and thanks for this terrific reception on this warm day where we're going to talk about some really important issues affecting American workers. Before we get into what I'm proposing and what I'd like to do, I want to make sure that we highlight a voice that will help illustrate some of what's at stake as we enter a modern economy where the traditional and the gig work economy collide. So please welcome to the stage Tabitha Lamb, who's going to share her story and help us frame all the things we're about to talk about.
Hello. So my name is Tabitha Lamb. I'm a proud Southside Democrat here in the Des Moines area, and I wanted to talk to you for just a moment about what it's like to be a worker in today's world. My entire family history revolves around people working hard and doing what it takes to survive. But throughout my life, I have experienced firsthand how workers like myself haven't been given a fair shot. Our changing economy makes it even harder. I've worked in fast food at Wendy's and in retail at Walmart. Most people in my community turn to jobs like these to make ends meet. But these employers never give their workers a fair shot. At these jobs, I never had control over my schedule. I was always paid the minimum wage, and on top of it all, I was always kept at part-time so that I wasn't entitled to any benefits, especially health care. I realized how little value these businesses place on their employees, and I saw the way that they prevented their workers from negotiating for a better deal. So instead, I decided to follow my passion for helping kids, and I went to college. And I became the first in my family to get a 4-year degree. Thanks. And I continued and got my graduate school degree to become a licensed teacher. While I was able to get some scholarships, I had to take out over $10,000 in loan debt to cover my tuitions, and still had to come up with part of the tuition out of my pocket. The largest challenge would be figuring out how to cover the cost of living, because all of the money didn't keep a roof over my head, food in my stomach, or pay for my chronic illness treatments. So I had to find a job, in addition to going to school full-time. Because I had to take classes and student teach during the day, it was difficult to find a job that was flexible enough with my schedule. That's when I found Rover. It was an app where I got paid to walk other people's dogs and watch them at my home or at their home. I did this in the evenings and on weekends, literally any time that I was free, in order to try and make ends meet. I started to pick up a few other gigs too. Care.com, online tutoring, anything I could find. But I'm gonna be honest, it was really hard. And there were weeks where it didn't matter how many hours I put in, I did not have enough money. I was pretty much working full-time for these online apps, but after each of them took their cut of what I made, I ended up making less than minimum wage. And since I was classified as an independent contractor, I had none of the basic wage protections that workers are guaranteed in a traditional job. And on top of that, none of these gigs provided any benefits. So I was forced to go into debt in order to pay for doctor visits and prescription meds. This is the reality for so many people. This is how the economy is working these days. I know my story isn't at all unique. And in many ways, it's becoming the standard for people in my generation. So many of my friends have found themselves working more and earning less, whether they're driving through the night for Uber or working all day at a fast food restaurant. These are the jobs that are out there. But there's no reason that these jobs can't give us the ability to earn a living wage, have basic workplace protections, and good benefits. We need protections for all workers and an economy where everyone can succeed. That's why I'm excited to be here and extra honored that he introduced me, which is really cool. Because I can see what he's doing and what that's going to mean for workers like me and other workers here in Iowa. Thank you.
See what I mean? Thank you, Tabitha, for sharing your story. And your story, as you mentioned, is the story of so many Americans, which is why it was important that we lead with that. And having married a teacher, I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty sure you're going to be a great one. These are the stories that remind us what is at stake. They are the stories that remind us what it's going to take for America to support Americans in the future. And it comes down to this basic idea, that a contractor is a worker and a gig is a job. I want to thank Pete Rimsons for the introduction, for his leadership in the building trades. Figured 2 Petes from Indiana is better than 1 today. And want to thank Mary McAdams for the Ankeny Democrats hosting us here. I know I'm here by way of the presidential election, but local Democratic organizations are also so important because they already get that we must not treat the presidency like it's the only office that matters. So many decisions are made locally, including decisions on things like gun safety, which is why I'm so glad that Amber Gustafson was here with us today, too. We appreciate your leadership and your courage. So I'm running for president because I think America's running out of time. We see a presidency that represents a tremendous problem, but not the problem. As grotesque as the racism and the demagoguery emanating from the White House is, we got to ask ourselves how a presidency like this even became possible. Because under ordinary circumstances, I would argue a guy like that never even gets within cheating distance of the Oval Office. But these aren't ordinary circumstances. The ground is shifting beneath our feet. Accelerating changes are happening all around us. And a lot of them are the changes that my generation has grown up with. An era of endless war and routine school shootings. A generation that is about to be the first in American history not to do better economically than our parents, unless we do something different, while inequality rises to toxic levels. We're going to live our entire adult lives on the business end of the climate disruption that used to be portrayed as a mysterious or distant thing coming in the future, and now something we see all around us in devastating hurricanes and floods, not just on the coast, but in places like Indiana and Iowa. And these problems are only going to get worse on the watch of the next American president. We're not that far from a day when half of the jobs we're used to right now will be replaced because of changing technology. And we're not far from a day where every year will be the worst year on record for climate-related disasters, which is why we need to think differently, to master these changes before they master us. And yet, at a time when the world is moving faster than ever and our challenges are getting more urgent and more complicated than ever, Washington's ability to respond has gotten slower than ever. Instead of growth, we got gridlock. Instead of making sure that a rising tide lifts all boats, we've got Republican members of Congress blocking things like a minimum wage increase. There ought to be a penalty for doing that, politically. When it comes to the complexity of technological change, I think the furthest it goes in the president's imagination is the awareness of a device that lets him put out the craziest thought he had overnight to the entire world in the morning. There's a lot more to technology than that. And meanwhile, while Washington's arguing over who looked best on cable today, for the first time ever, there were more Chinese companies than American ones on Fortune's Global 500. So there's a lot of uncertainty in our future, and the biggest thing we got to get our heads around is that we will not meet this moment by clinging to the status quo, trying to put a wall up around an old reality, or trying to go back to normal. We are where we are because normal didn't work. And we're not going to get very far as long as the Democratic Party is organizing ourselves around how much to accommodate or how much to oppose Republican policies. We need to be leading the way and make them respond to our ideas. And that means being ready to profoundly reform and restructure an economy and a political system that isn't working anymore, which is what calls for a new message and a new messenger. And that's where I come in. I'm a different kind of messenger because I belong to this generation that's lived so many of the realities of our time. People in my life have been saved by Obamacare and killed by the opioid crisis. My own family's finances were secured on one hand by Medicare and are pressed on the other hand by six-figure student debt. My marriage exists by the grace of a single vote on the United States Supreme Court. By the way, thank you, Iowa, for your leadership on that issue. The same decade where America changed the course of my life in that way, it also changed the course of my life by orders that sent me into a foreign war. Now I'm living the challenges of a 21st century urban mayor in the industrial Midwest, while walking in the way of a religious progressive. By the way, we know that God does not belong to a political party, right? Okay, let's go. Especially not one that puts children in cages or takes food out of the mouths of the hungry. So when I say there's no going back, it's not because I don't feel like going back, it's that I can't. None of us can. That's the problem with Make America Great Again. There is no honest politics that revolves around the word again. There's only the future and making sure that it's better than the past. It's why I am determined to knit together our social fabric with a call to service that will create 1 million paid service opportunities for the American people across the nation. And it is why I insist that we match the ambition of the Marshall Plan with a Douglas Plan to build racial equality in home ownership, entrepreneurship, health, criminal justice, education, and democracy for those who are excluded to this day in our country. It's why I am insisting on real action on gun violence and climate change, common sense immigration reform, and a better democracy. And it's why I insist we stop open-ended authorizations for endless warfare paid for in blood and treasure by the American people, my generation and the ones to come after. And it is why, as president, I am prepared to deliver an economy that actually works for all of us. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. So it starts decades ago. It starts right about the time I was born, the beginning of the Reagan era. We're promised a rising tide that will lift all boats. All we got to do is cut the rules for banks and cut some taxes, and the rising tide will rise, and all of us will be lifted up. And the funny thing is, we got the rising tide part, right? GDP came up, stock market went up, but for 90% of us, our boats barely budged at all. They were effectively roped down to the ocean floor. And so you got to ask, while this economy grows, who is this economy growing for? There are whole neighborhoods in my community, and I know around the country, where it's as if the entire recovery never even happened, because we're living in the most unequal economy of modern times. It's not working for Guy in Bettendorf, who told us about how he's driving for DoorDash because everyone needs a side job these days, he says. As if we were living in a time of national hardship, not a time of American plenty. It's not working for the mother I met in Charleston, South Carolina. She was in a fight to make more than $7.25 an hour at McDonald's, not for her, but so that she could pay for her son's medical treatment. She's tired of waiting for something to trickle down. She's ready for her wages to go up. What good does it do to, think about this one, have the Dow rising and life expectancy falling in this country? What does that tell you about who the economy is working for right now? What's the point of a low unemployment rate if people who are working full-time or working 2 or 3 jobs, people like Tabitha, who have gone through more employers in the course of an ordinary week than my parents expected to do in their lifetime, and still aren't able to make ends meet? So, yeah, the president's going to say unemployment is low. And it is. Of course, under the Obama administration, it went from like 12 to 5, and then he sees it go from 5 to 4, and he's like the rooster, thinks he made the sun come up, which I think we ought to think about. But even then, at the end of the day, we're learning just how much more there is to the economy than a couple numbers on a page. It has to actually mean earning enough to live on and staying ahead of things like college tuition bills and health care premiums. And part of the story of why so many are being left behind has to do with the massive forces changing the world around us, globalization, technology, automation. But a lot of it happened not because of cosmic forces, but because of political choices. Choices like the systematic attack on labor and unionization in this country. Last 30 or 40 years, the stagnation of income for the middle class and the decline in union membership have happened basically at the same time. That's not a coincidence. That's the reason. It's also not a coincidence that union membership dropped after conservative lawmakers systematically sought to silence the voices of workers from Washington to Wisconsin. Or here in Iowa, where the legislature stripped public employees of their bargaining rights. That's why union membership has fallen from 15% in 1990 to 8% here today in Iowa. When it was organized labor that got us the middle-class lifestyle, the 40-hour work week, basic labor protections, child and safety labor standards. These things came about not on their own, but because people stood up and demanded them. People like you, people like us, stood up and demanded them. And now it's our turn to stand up again and empower workers in the name of our values and in the name of building a fairer economy with a more flexible and resilient workforce for tomorrow that benefits all of us. It's time for us to realize that when we talk about jobs, and sometimes jobs is a shorthand for the economy, what really matters is the good that jobs can do for workers, not the other way around. This is why my bigger effort in this campaign is to break the spell that has people thinking that these core American values belong on one side of the aisle, like freedom. Freedom is not just freedom from taxes and regulations. It's freedom to live a life of your choosing. It's the freedom you gain when you have a great education, which, by the way, is why we got to appoint a Secretary of Education who believes in public education. But you're also not free in this country if you are prevented from organizing into a union to insist on better wages and working conditions. That's American freedom, too. Now, in my career, I have been proud to stand with organized labor. As Pete mentioned, started my first political campaign in the basement of the Building Trades Hall in South Bend. My campaign team was just with AFGE workers at the VA in Des Moines this week. We were with the striking Stop and Shop workers in Boston. In South Bend, we had our 911 workers decide to organize into AFSCME, and we welcomed that. Do we have any AFSCME in the house, by the way? All right. We're glad that you're in South Bend. These are workers that had some of the most stressful jobs in government, handling 911 calls. And it became easier, frankly, from a management perspective, to do a good job and do right by them once they were organized, because that voice was needed in the room where the decisions were made. So today, I am proud to announce a plan that empowers all workers, lifts wages, and gives workers and employers the tools they need to thrive in this changing economy, a rising tide that actually lifts all boats. When I am president, we're going to ensure that workers have the predictable hours, predictable wages, and predictable support that they deserve. So how are we actually going to do it? Well, first, we're going to guarantee access to paid sick leave and paid family leave no matter where you work. And if your employer doesn't provide at least 7 paid sick leave days, they will be required to pay into a state fund that workers can draw from. We're going to increase resources to go after wage theft, to protect folks like the subcontractor in Ames who still hasn't been paid for painting student housing because his employer knows he could stiff him without facing any consequences. That's got to end, and we're going to enforce on that. We're going to bring back the Obama-era overtime regulations that would guarantee time and a half pay to over 8 million workers around this country. And we're going to finish the work of the House of Representatives this week and finally raise the minimum wage to $15 and up by 2025. Don't let a racist attack on congresswomen distract from what those congresswomen were working on, which was to make all of us better off with higher wages. That's 33 million American workers, including 500,000 right here in Iowa. And while we're at it, we're going to change how we establish how the economy is growing. We're not going to measure it by abstract numbers like GDP. We're going to measure it by how the 90% are doing. So in my administration, I will measure America's economic success based on your paycheck. We're also going to move to take power back from corporations and give it to workers, expanding who gets to unionize, guaranteeing bargaining rights for all American workers, whether you drive an Uber, work at a McDonald's, or mop a floor at Google. Now, that's harder than it sounds. It means we're going to have to amend laws that allow independent contractors to unionize. It means we have to make sure that employers can't misclassify their workers as independent contractors when they're functionally employees. And it's not just who can unionize, it's also how you can do it. Ensuring that workers can hear from union organizers and imposing multi-million-dollar penalties on employers who interfere with union elections, which is happening way too much in this country. And my administration will give contracting preference to employers who do right by their workers, because I don't want the federal government using taxpayer money to support companies that don't support the people who work for them on our behalf. Now, we also know that a lot of people have been excluded from labor protections who are among the most vulnerable, like domestic workers and farm workers, including about 200,000 who work the fields in Iowa. So we're going to protect undocumented workers from retaliation if they report labor violations. And we're going to reform visa portability so that you're not stuck working for an abusive employer. You have a choice. We got to make sure that everybody's protected. And when I'm president, we are going to act to make sure that women truly have equal pay and equal opportunity in the workplace. That means making large employers make their total gender pay gap public so that everybody can see, because that transparency will help end the injustice. They already collect the data, we might as well put it out. And that pay transparency will encourage companies to promote and retain women in higher paying roles. We're going to pass legislation to promote equal pay, crack down on pregnancy discrimination, and empower workers dealing with discrimination and harassment, because you should not have to put up with that in the 21st century. Our economy is always changing, so it's time that our laws and policies change too. The new economy's got to come in line with our deepest values, with bold and creative solutions that give American workers a greater voice and greater protection. In 21st century, it is time for American employers to do right by American workers. Those are the values that we stand for. My personal stake in this is to make sure that I can hold my head high when my kids are old enough to vote, and they ask me what we did in 2020. What we did to bring about a world that they live in, and I want to be proud of the world we built for them. I want to tell them that we, way back in the day, had this crazy thing called the Electoral College, and how we fought for a fairer democracy and made it actually a reality. I'm going to tell them about how shocking it was that gun violence was widespread once upon a time in this country, and tell them we started acting in 2020 to make sure that it was a distant memory by the time they were old enough to ask me about it. I'll tell them about the courage that it took to bring about the world where race was never a predictor of your health or your wealth or your life expectancy, or your job prospects, or your relationship with law enforcement. It'll be a great story to tell that'll make us proud when we tell them that we beat the odds and got ahead of climate change before everything was lost. And that we were the ones who made sure that a rising tide really did lift all boats in the economy that they were growing up and working in. That's up to us. Organizing is like running for office. It's an act of hope. Sometimes it's motivated by anger. Sometimes it's motivated by urgency. Sometimes it's motivated by an awareness of darkness. But at the end of the day, it is an act of hope and faith that when we get together, it will matter. That we can work the pulleys and levers of power in this economy and in this democracy to bring about a better day. And if you have that hope, I need your help. So can I look to you to help spread this message and bring about a better day? Are you ready to put away the status quo and bring about a day when we master the changes of the era ahead of us? Then we're going to deliver. I'm looking forward to having a conversation before we call it a day. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for caring enough about this, and thank you in advance for fighting for a better economy for everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You know how to make a guy feel welcome. I'm going to keep coming back to Ankeny. I appreciate it. I think we got some folks out with microphones, and we will take as many questions as time allows. I'm looking for our runners. You got one?
Oh, hi. So, stand up. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So I recently just went to D.C. to talk to Nancy Pelosi to speak for the 15th hour in the union. And my question is, what are you going to do with that?
All right. So bottom line is, everybody ought to have at least $15 an hour and the right to unionize. Mind my asking where you work?
What was that?
Are you impacted by minimum wage law?
Yes,
All right.
definitely.
So what are some of the biggest differences in making your life if we got to 15 in a hurry?
Like I can like save money, but now I can't save money because I'm making like $9 an hour.
Right. So you ought to be able to save and build for the future.
Yes,
based
of
on work.
course.
We got so many people working full time, working hard, and the whole idea of the American dream is supposed to be that you work, you get ahead. And yet you look at the minimum wage and you see it falling further and further behind. So this time, when we raise the minimum wage, I'm proposing we actually peg it to inflation in median wages so we don't have to go back to Congress every time. Thank you. But thank you for standing up for that.
Thank you.
And one more thing, I said it before, but I just want to say it one more time. The House passed a bill on the minimum wage, and the Senate's going to kill it. Senate Republicans ought to pay a price for killing something that the American people want and need. So let's not let anybody forget it. This side.
Hi, Pete. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for coming.
I am a part of the generation that you talked about in which we will likely not make as much as our parents' generation. I'm a high school administrator, and so having those post-secondary conversations, looking at that trend, can be really difficult. So what will you do to increase wages for that future generation and really increase hope while still maintaining the growth of the economy?
Right. It's so important, and I'm glad you said while still maintaining growth in the economy, because the problem is part of the spell they cast over us was to say, you know, if we raise wages, it's going to kill growth. But
We've got years and years and decades worth of data on things like the minimum wage, which did not kill jobs when we raised it. Actually, higher minimum wages correspond with some of the greatest moments of growth in American history. And the same is true if we have the right kind of policies to support people up and down the scale, earning more. But part of it's not just the wage, it's the purchasing power of what you earn. I mean, the number on the page on your paycheck can go up, but we got to get ahead of the costs of tuition. We got to get ahead of the costs of health care. And it's why we need to move to universal health care, so you don't have to worry about whether this is going to drag you down as you're getting ahead. It's part of why the federal government needs to expand Pell Grants. And again, this time when we expand Pell, let's actually attach it to inflation so you don't have to go back to Congress every time it's not worth what it ought to be. And if we undertake these measures, we know that the economy overall will be better off. You look at the numbers. We've gone through a period where the economy grew by about 60%. And for half of us over those decades, but didn't see any income growth at all. It's just not right. And it's not an accident. It's not the universe. It's choices made in Washington. That's why I'm proposing we make those choices differently. And it's going to make everybody better off, from a minimum wage worker to somebody seeking to get ahead, become a teacher, become a doctor, and move further and further into the middle class. So thanks for your work. All right.
Okay. My name is Jacob Pearl. I'm from City Rapid, Iowa, and I worked for McDonald's all my life. I started back in 2014. I'm making $7.25. I work from sunset to sundown. Sometimes I work my hand be so I'm still working. But we cannot live on no $7.25. We cannot live on no $8.25. That's why we are scratching that for $15 the minimum wage and plus the union. We need a union. We need health insurance. We all need it. Not only me, the whole entire nation, people need a union. Because I worked all my life ever since I was a kid. I worked till my hand got sore. I'm working right now, my hand sore, and I'm still getting $9.25 an hour. I mean, what we going to do about the union? What we going to do about health insurance? We all need it. Right. Because sooner or later, see, I'm going to get ready to retire. I'll be 66 years old. I won't have nothing left for no retire. I don't have nothing for nothing because I used to be in the union a long time ago. When I came to Cedar Rapids, see, my hometown is from Tennessee because I worked all my life from the South. That's my hometown. I'm out speaking for the whole community, not only for myself. I'm speaking for the whole McDonald's. Not only for myself, I'm speaking for everybody. We need a Kennedy so we can be able to get the minimum wage go up. We need health insurance. We need a president like everybody so we can get the union.
That's right.
That's what we need. And thank God that I'm here.
And as president, I'm going to stand up for that. I'm going to stand up for you. And you're right. It's the wages, but it's also access to a union. And it's one of the reasons we're also proposing multi-employer bargaining. And what I mean by that is it would be great if workers across the country could organize and bargain with McDonald's. But they say you work for the franchise, right? And that's how they get around that.
I worked all over. I worked down in Memphis, Tennessee. I used to chop cotton. I used to pick cabbage. I used to work 3 or 4 jobs all over Tennessee. And when I got to City Rapids, I didn't even know nothing about Iowa. When I first got here, I tell you the truth. But when I got my first job, I didn't know nobody in City Rapids. I got my first job for the city. I was making $18 an hour. Plus, I had a union. Plus, I worked for the sanitation department. I had a union. I had the street department. I had a union. Why we ain't got no union now?
Your story is America's story.
Oh yeah.
The less people are in unions, the less people are making.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it goes like that.
But we need a union. We
That's
need
right.
a union. That's why we are striking now, so we can get a union going for ourselves, health insurance, sick pay, all that. That's what we need.
And under our plan for multi-employer bargaining, you would be able to get together with workers across the street at a Burger King or Taco Bell and form a union that would bargain for you across employers if that's the right thing for you as workers. And you
it's the
decide
right
that's
thing.
to do.
It's the right thing for we to do. Because a couple of days ago, we went to Taco Bell's. When my friend was working at Taco Bell's, and they tried to get rid of him, but they can't do it.
That's
but
right.
we got a union going on. We're going to fight till we get what we want. Even the whole population, we got to fight to get what we need. We need a union.
And we're going to fight for each
other.
other.
Everything we do, we need a union.
Thank you. Good. Okay.
Hi, I'm a union machinist,
Fantastic.
and I'm prepared because I knew I'd screw it up if I didn't. Since the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 amended the National Labor Relations Act, it has allowed states to pass right-to-work laws, and the blue-collar American worker has been continuously attacked. In my view, it's been a race to the bottom ever since. What are your views on the right-to-work states, and how do you propose to reverse some of the damage done and improve the state of labor?
Thank you. Right-to-work laws have not made American workers better off. We saw it in Indiana, seen it in a lot of states. Iowa was one of the ones that unfortunately led the way in this trend. And it's another example of the difference between numbers on a page and people's lives. It's nice for a state like Indiana to, rank near the top in surveys of CEOs about where they most like to be doing business. But what's the point of that if we rank near the bottom on indicators of income or quality of life or health or life expectancy or any of the things that we actually work for when we're working? Which is why I propose amendments to federal labor law that will do away with right to work. All right. Back over on this side. Right here.
I don't know if it's good, but we're being pushy. First of all, thank you for your service. I'm a veteran, but I'm also, most importantly, a military mom, as is she. I would like
Thank
to...
you for your service, because when you
Thank you.
give it that way, you're serving our country too.
Sorry. I'm a little nervous. I wanted to ask you, as president, would you please support the Military Justice Improvement Act? And for those that aren't familiar, it's to take the convening authority away from the chain of command and commanders in cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Last year, 20,500 service members, both men and women, and actually per capita, men are sexually assaulted more than women, were assaulted. And I'm sorry, excuse my language, I'm pissed off. We're sending our best and our brightest out there. These are young men and women wearing the uniform, and they deserve better. So please support this Military Justice Improvement Act.
Thank you. This is an important issue that doesn't get talked about enough. And let me lead with the bottom line up front, like we said in the military bluff. I'm with you, and I agree. Let me share a little bit about why. First of all, when you are under the kind of pressure that you're under in a military unit, you got enough to deal with and to worry about without the stresses created by workplace harassment. And the way it's set up right now has you basically left to report these things to sometimes the same chain of command where there's a problem. It sometimes fell to me as a young lieutenant to train my unit in the procedures and processes around sexual harassment. And while it is true that the military is light years ahead where they used to be, this fundamental problem you're describing remains. The idea that somebody who experiences harassment will not necessarily be able to take it to a trusted outside authority. And it is why we need to make that reform, to move the handling of those cases outside of the chain of command, as we would in so many other parts of American society, and let our military service members focus on the ability to do their job and know that we have their back when they do. So thank you. Right here in the back.
I feel like we're becoming old friends because I think I've seen you now 4 or 5 times.
Thanks for coming in for the rerun.
Yeah. But you keep getting better. I don't
Well, that's
know.
good.
Yeah.
I hate if it was the other way around, so that's encouraging. Thank you.
So my question is, with the economy, my son-in-law and daughter are about $125,000 in debt with student loan. So hard to buy a house. They're raising kids. Hard to buy a car. They have fluctuating rates.
Right.
What are we going to do?
Right. Again, this is, we're there too. And they're doing exactly what we encouraged young people to do, right? Go take out a loan, borrow against your future earnings while you get the education to get ahead. I married a teacher who earned less after he got his master's. I hope this doesn't discourage you, Tabitha. But earned less after he got his master's and went into teaching again than he did in the odd jobs he was working to put himself through school to become a teacher. So I got a whole other thing on teacher pay, but we'll talk about that another day. Look, we've got to get this crushing debt load off of folks' backs. And there's several things we can do. First of all, you talk about the interest rates and the way they're out of control. If we can get them under control for a house or a car, we ought to be able to get them under control for an education. Secondly, there are opportunities, there are things like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is a wonderful way to encourage people to be in public service and to be able to do away with your debt. But right now, it's almost impossible to take advantage of. You got to do it for 10 years, not miss a payment, and only certain kinds of loans qualify. The vast majority of people who put in for it never get it. We've got to fix that and make it much more generous and much more straightforward so that that becomes another option for people seeking to do away with their debt. Another thing we got to mention, and this isn't everybody, but it affects a lot of people, is that there have been a lot of cases of debt run up by some of these for-profit colleges that target. By the way, they target veteran. The moment I redeployed from Afghanistan, my Facebook ad feed just filled up with ads for some of these programs. Now, if the program's doing right by their students, great. But under the Obama administration, they were held accountable for whether they produced or not. And if you were substandard and failed your students, there were consequences for that. This administration did away with that accountability. Not only do we need to restore it, but we need to do away with the debt from the schools that effectively turned the Department of Education into America's biggest predatory lender. And that's where we begin when we talk about wiping away student debt. Right up here in the front. Mike's on its way to you.
My name's John McInerney. I'm a vet. Des Moines is one of the greatest places to live when you're a vet. Almost everywhere I go, when they find out I'm a veteran, they say thank you for your service. One of the things that's even better for being a vet in this area is the VA we have down here. It's one of the best in the country. I would hope that you would have some ability to make the other veterans hospitals like the one we have here. They're going into holistic medicine now. They're way ahead of anything you could get in the civilian market. And I'm sure that they're more cost effective than anything that the civilians are providing. As far as I'm concerned, they're the model for what will be the single payer. And so I'd like to see that transition modeled on the VA like we have it right now, and get rid of these people that talk about privatizing it. That's what I want to say.
Well, first of all, thank you for serving. And I think the core value that's at stake here is to recognize that when the VA is taking care of you, that's not doing you a favor. That's keeping a promise because you took care of all of us. That's why we have a VA. And there's a lot of work we got to do to tune up the VA system. There's no question. We got to make sure that fewer veterans have to go through a long drive in order to get to a quality hospital. We got to make sure that there's flexibility. We got to make sure that there's mental health parity because different wars have different wounds, and we're finally acknowledging the importance of mental alongside physical health. But privatization is not the answer for the VA. There is a reason we have a VA. There's a lot of things we would never have learned as a country about things from Agent Orange to traumatic brain injury if it weren't for the work happening inside the VA. And so what we need to do is tune it up, properly fund it, and bring it into the 21st century, not try to privatize it, knowing how many Americans have been left out and fallen through the cracks because of the corporate domination of the healthcare system that so many civilians live in. So thank you for speaking up for it, and help is on the way. Thank you. Thanks. All right. See one right down the aisle. Oh, all right. We'll do both of you. Why don't you both, since I called on both of you, both ask your question, and then we'll see if I can merge it into one answer.
Hi, Mayor Pete. My name is Charlene, and I'm a climate change communicator. And I would like to know, when you become president, what your plan of attack to the beginning of the pipe issues that we have to help mitigate climate change issues. So I'm sick of dealing with the end of the pipe. I'm sick of throwing money at it. I'm sure we're all sick of paying for it with our taxes, extreme events, rising sea levels, health issues that come about. So how are we going to encourage adaptation and change at the beginning of that pipe?
Very good. Thank you. I'll come to it in a second.
Go ahead and ask your question. Can you stand up?
You can do that next. I had nothing to do with that.
Okay. All right. So, as you said, we're kind of on the business end of all these climate change problems, right? Where it is a lot more expensive to clean up a flood zone than it is, even across the American economy, than it is to prevent the kind of carbon going into the atmosphere in the first place, if we have the right kind of framework to deal with it. It's why we got to get over the political allergy to the T word and talk about a carbon tax and dividend. Now, a lot of people hear that and they think this means taking money out of the economy. And it could be, and I would not support it in that case. I support a different version. What you do is you take the funds that are raised from that and you immediately, same year, rebate them out to the American people with a progressive formula so that most of us, it's kind of like the Bush tax cut. You get a check in the mail. But alongside that, we've helped tune up the issues in our economy. And it helps incentivize creating jobs, many of which, by the way, are union jobs, especially when my plan goes through, and there's more union jobs to begin with, in renewable energy, energy storage, carbon storage, and sustainable agriculture, which I think is a huge and hugely unsung part of the solution. This is not about telling some Americans that work in traditional industries that they're part of a problem. This is about asking all Americans to come together and be part of the solution. And we need to support that with federal policy and with a way of bringing everybody to the table, the private sector, the agricultural sector, the academic sector, the social sector. We can do it in a national project as ambitious as that moon landing we were celebrating last year. It's something that we will be proud of when we get it right, and will help restore American leadership around the world at a time when American leadership is needed.
I give you credit. You actually did kind of touch on this. I'm a city councilman in a town of Nevada, about 20 miles from here, on the borderline of rural, but there are much more rural counties in Iowa, obviously. The economic impact and wage growth, job growth does not always come to the rural areas as much as it does to the urban. What does your plan do to specifically address rural growth economically, wage, and quality of life?
Terrific. Thank you. So it's kind of similar for me. I live in a city, but I'm a short bike ride or a long walk from the nearest cornfield where I'm at. And people are hurting. And there are a lot of communities, 1 or 2 counties away from me, that are a lot like the communities here in this part of Iowa, where you got parents and grandparents worried that their kids or grandkids would never find a way to live in the communities they grew up in. And it's demoralizing, but it doesn't have to be this way. We have got to invest in the foundations of our economy and our society in a way that that benefits rural communities too. And there's several specific things that we can and should do. Part of it is contemplated in the labor plan. So simply by having wages be higher, also the protections we plan to extend to farm workers. We're going to make it possible for a lot of people who then turn around and spend that money in the other kinds of businesses who don't necessarily work on a farm but are in rural parts of the Midwest and around the country to be able to contribute more to the economy. We've also got to make sure that we're investing in the right kind of infrastructure. And I don't just mean roads and bridges and pipes, although that's very important and deserves more federal support. But I also mean the social infrastructure, the public health infrastructure. We got rural hospitals closing at an alarming rate. Now, part of that would be better if Medicaid expansion were more widespread. A lot of it will be better when we get to universal health care like I'm proposing. We need to take advantage of the fact that rural America is very competitive cost-wise with a lot of the bigger cities around the country. And everything from telemedicine and telehealth to telecommuting for work could unlock new possibilities for people to build new forms of organizing their lives in a way that makes everybody better off and makes our American lifeways more sustainable. But that means we got to have some actual support. Yes, broadband is part of that, for sure. We got to extend. By the way, if the corporate world can't deliver broadband to rural areas, this is another example, like healthcare, where we ought to contemplate a public option to make sure it actually gets done. Right. Gentleman in the polo or blue shirt. There we go.
Hi, Mayor Pete. So I am a person with some minor disabilities. And the Americans with Disabilities Act, I believe, has failed a lot of people with disabilities as far as work, schooling. My question to you is, do you have a plan to maybe redo the Americans with Disabilities Act or make improvements on it so that people with disabilities can have a better time finding jobs or getting the resources that they need?
Yes, and thank you for speaking up. Thank you for speaking up because we've got to do better. It goes to education. We've never properly funded the IDEA, the act that makes sure that that students with disabilities get the resources they need. We also have a sub-minimum wage right now, and I don't think we should. Because when you work, your work is as good as anybody's work, and you ought to be able to contribute with your wages. And it's also a culture that looks at what everybody brings, because I think the most important thing I think about when I think about how you're going to succeed in the workplace, frankly, isn't just making sure we do right by you, but knowing that you're going to contribute to your community and to your workplace, and you ought to be empowered to do that. So thank you for speaking up to do that politically. Let's make sure it happens economically, too. All right. Let's see. I lost track of my runners. Right here. Yep.
Mayor Pete, again, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I have a concern because the conservative media continually positions the Democratic Party as socialist and communist, nonstop. When you're elected president, how are you going to contradict this?
Yeah. Thank you. This is really important because, well, first of all, we got to show up. So I know it was a little controversial within the party, but I made the decision to appear on Fox News because I'm worried those viewers will never hear our message at all if people like me aren't there to say it. I also think we ought to have the courage of our convictions. So, you look at what I have to say. I don't go as far as some. I go further than most. But I always base it on what I think is going to be right for the country. Because I've noticed this over the last few years. I think we all experienced this during the Obama presidency. And I've reached this conclusion. If we adopt a very far left political agenda, they're going to call us crazy socialists. If, on the other hand, we adopt a moderate or conservative agenda, you know what they're going to do? They're going to call us crazy socialists. So we might as well just be for what we're for, make the case for it, win hearts and minds, and do it based on the results of the work that we do. When more people are getting paid because of this plan, when people are getting paid more, when health care is more secure, when the economy really is working for everybody, that's hard to argue with. Just like the Affordable Care Act was something that even the Republicans couldn't get rid of when they controlled the House and Senate. They're trying now in a sneaky way, but they couldn't do it to our faces because so many people got in the faces of members of Congress and said, hey, this is what this means in my life. Don't take this away because it's making a difference in my family. That's why, but that's also why we got to keep the eye on the ball of these policies. We got to do, this is going to be hard. It's going to take tremendous discipline for the next nominee. We got to do two things at once. We got to point to the wrongdoing of the president. We tells a lie. We got to say what the truth is. And when there's an outrage, we got to point it out. We can't stand for it. But we must not give him the power to change the subject. Because when the subject is your life, that's when we win. All right. Right, Heaven.
Thank you for being here. My name's Andy. I'm 51 and I'm a realtor, and I wanted to discuss something that's affecting school boards, municipalities, towns, and states. With the advent of the internet and being able to ship goods from China directly to your house, we've lost retail in our country that's been phenomenal. In my lifetime, I never thought it would even be possible. So we're losing sales tax, we're losing property tax, we're losing payroll tax. What's your thoughts? I don't think people are talking about this stuff, and I think it's a very serious issue. Can you please share your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for that. We've seen it. Every main street in the country has seen this, right? And the smaller the town, the bigger the impact. Look, there are advantages to being plugged into the rest of the world. I'm not saying we ought to try to unplug, but some of these companies are not just profiting off things like the ability to move goods around the world. They're also profiting over the fact that the rules have been twisted to their advantage. If one of the most profitable companies in the world, like Amazon, pays less in federal income taxes than you and I did, something is wrong. And I believe if we have a fair playing field, and we start, when we're looking for evidence of wrongdoing, we start with the companies that have accumulated such concentration of wealth that they've taken that and turned it into a concentration of power over our political system, that we hold them accountable from how they're treating the workers, to how they're treating customers, to the impact that they're having on our communities. Because there is an advantage that comes to homegrown business, that comes to homegrown labor, homegrown ideas. And we need a federal policy that can tell the difference, that can support it, and can make sure that competition is a lot more fair than it is today. Thank you.
Okay, I know you're a great subject about the economy. I love hearing what you're saying. But wine or beer or Fireball?
Ooh. Well, in 6 months we might be into Fireball territory, but for now, just beer. Just beer for now. Right here in the great T-shirt.
Okay. Hi, my name's Anna. Big fan.
Thank you.
I do want to talk more about your plan about the Electoral College, because I know we were all screwed over in 2016 with the Electoral College, but the good thing about the Electoral College is that it represents states that don't have as big as populations as California and New York, which is the best part about living in Iowa, is that we have that representation. So what are you going to do to address that? Because I know you want to rewrite the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College.
Yeah, so the way I think of it is, it's based on a very simple idea, which is that people ought to all count the same. We have a Senate that privileges small states. When we think about the Electoral College, it actually doesn't benefit small states. It benefits certain states. So a state with a lot of people like California is left out. So is a state with not a lot of people like Wyoming. A medium state like Indiana doesn't count. And another medium-sized state that's on the other side of the aisle, like maybe Connecticut, also doesn't count. A big Republican state like Texas doesn't count. And a small Democratic state like Delaware usually doesn't count. And the way I see it, states don't vote, people do. And think about it this way. So every statewide election works this way, right? We just count up all the votes and give it to the person who gets the most, like most elections. And people who are running for governor, they go to small communities and big ones, right? You have to, because even if there's not that many voters in that particular small community, you have to go there to demonstrate that you understand what's impacting small communities and to listen. At least if you're any good at politics, you ought to be doing that, right? I view it the same way nationally. And then you think about, you know, the biggest way as an Iowan that the Electoral College changed your life is that you're living under the Trump administration instead of the Clinton one, and you, I'm not sure if, can I assume you were alive during the Bush administration versus, I'm getting scared that, yeah, all right. Nothing makes me feel older than realizing that people were not around for that. But it's that you lived during a Bush administration instead of a Gore administration. That's how it actually affected you. Now, that being said, when it comes to the primary process, I really admire the way that Iowans take very seriously in the run-up to the caucus, in this part of the nomination, the responsibility that you all have in working us over, kicking the tires on us, and making sure that just because we look good on cable doesn't give us a pass on how to interact with actual human beings. And it's one of the things I really enjoy about this process. So, all right, I'm told we're down to our last question, so State gets the last word. Coming to you.
So when I graduated high school, I thought I had enough money to get all the way through college, but every year the state has upped tuition on us because they keep cutting fundings to the school. And now I'm already $15,000 in debt. I work 2 jobs, and I want to go to law school afterwards. So how do you...
And you're just starting...
I'm a junior now.
Junior. Wow.
Yes. So how do we make it so that the debt's not a problem in the first place, so that people like me don't ever get to that point?
Right. Well, I'm glad you're raising it that way, because we can talk about stuff to do on the back end with that, but we ought to get to where you don't have to run it up in the first place, right? You got enough to worry about getting through college without trying to figure out your entire financial future. And a huge part of it, states need to step up, and the federal government can press states to step up. So in addition to federal resources, like Pell Grants, for example, I'm proposing that we massively expand Pell Grants, and we make them eligible for living expenses, not just for tuition, because we know that's a huge part of what holds people back. And again, like the minimum wage, I would propose that we do it in a way that's tied to inflation, so it grows without us having to go back and argue this over and over again. But we also got to talk about the role of the states, because as one economist put it, we went from having state-run to state-supported to state-subsidized to like state-related universities, right? They're playing less and less of a role, and the costs haven't gone away. They're just putting them on you instead of the state stepping up. And so I think we can use a bit of a carrot and stick system, since the federal government has a relationship with the states, to reward the states that step up and don't keep heaping the responsibility for meeting these costs onto the student at an unreasonable level. I just got the high sign that our time is up, but as you probably noticed, I'm spending a lot of time in Iowa, and that's going to continue, and I hope I'll have more chances to get to know you, to talk about these issues. I hope you will spread the word, especially about plans like this wages and labor plan that's going to impact everyday life in this country, because that, I believe, is why the human species invented politics. It's to make it possible for us to live better in the everyday. It's not about whatever crazy thing the president was up to or who looks good on cable. It's about our everyday lives. And we have the power to turn that around in a way that's going to make us all proud of what we did in 2020. We might be underreacting to the importance of the moment we're living in right now. But I know that's not true of the people in this room. So please go out, spread the word. Can I count on you to make sure everybody you know becomes part of the process? Can I look to you for help? And thank you for being part of this. Thank you for your support. Thank you for caring about the future of this country. And I will see you on the trail. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.